Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency, for the honor of your presence, which demonstrates the seriousness Colombia attaches to this important subject. And this subject certainly has consequences for international peace and security. We thank the Secretary General for his insightful intervention and join in welcoming other excellencies and distinguished colleagues to this debate. Mr. President, Liberia welcomes Colombia's stewardship of this debate, not merely as a diplomatic courtesy. Colombia earned its authority on this subject through blood, patience, and the willingness to negotiate with people it had temptations not to. That is an important credential that matters in a room that is now convened to discuss mediation. We listened to President Petro today because Colombia has walked the path, paid the price, and lived to continue to build the peace. Excellencies, this year alone, today's debate marks the 28th session this Council has convened on the crisis in the Middle East. Let's be clear. We have not failed for the lack of words or good intentions. We have failed for the weakness in the architecture for building just and lasting peace, as well as the political will to continue to strengthen and deepen it. Today, Liberia speaks from the scar tissue of our own history. We are a nation that looked into the abyss of civil war and chose negotiated peace over mutual annihilation. We learned at great cost that victory that is exclusive, especially militarily, is an illusion. It is merely an intermission before the next generation's vengeance that is bound to happen. That lesson is not ours alone. The pages of history is replete with it. And truthfully, it belongs to every party, to every conflict, especially the conflict in the Middle East, and certainly to every member of this council that holds influence over them. Mr. President, Excellencies, Colombia's concept note asks the right question. Not whether mediation matters, because we all know they do, but why it keeps failing, and what structural conditions will allow it to succeed. Liberia offers, therefore, these three possible answers. First, mediation must become permanent and not episodic. We have seen across the conflicts, envoys arrive at moments of crisis and depart when the shooting pauses, or as the Secretary General aptly calls it, during the period of lesser fire. What the region requires is a standing UN dialogue secretariat with a defined mandate, cross-conflict access, and the authority to hold all parties to their previous commitments between rounds, not only during them. Durable ceasefires, as this concept note rightly observes, depend on credible verification. Verification requires presence. Presence requires permanence. Permanence builds trust. The Secretary General should be requested to establish this mechanism within the framework of his existing good office's authority. And it should be insulated from veto with regular reporting to the full membership. Second, much needed trust must be built from the ground up and not assumed from the summit down. Macro political frameworks collapse because they demand that parties trust each other before trust actually exists. Liberia therefore proposes a bottom-up guarantees model, drawing directly on Colombia's own peace architecture, in which the phased release of reconstruction capital, the restoration of humanitarian corridors, and the easing of economic pressures are tied explicitly to verifiable, localized de-escalation milestones monitored by states with no military relationship to either conflicting party. This model also directly addresses the food security and humanitarian access dimensions this concept note raises. When compliance unlocks reconstruction, capital, corridor by corridor, civilians receive both security and sustenance as integrated outcomes of the same process, not as separate humanitarian appeals that arrive too late. Third, the Council must address the mediation gap it has created within itself. When members of this body are parties to the conflict, directly or by proxy, the Council cannot simultaneously be its impartial mediator. Credible mediation further requires that all actors with influence over the outcome, whether state or non-state, be held to the same standard of engagement, and that no party be shielded from accountability by the protective architecture of this chamber. Where the Council is compromised by its own divisions, mediation leadership must be formally referred to the Secretary General's good offices. That referral preserves the Council's oversight role while restoring the impartiality that mediation demands. On freedom of navigation and energy security, both imperiled by the current instability, only a sustained political process of this kind, with gratitude to Pakistan, can provide the durable guarantees that maritime and commercial actors require. No naval deployment substitutes for a negotiated agreement. Mr. President, peace is never an elegant formula. It is often difficult and a messy series of concessions that leave everyone truly exhausted but alive. And that is infinitely preferable, even when imperfect, to the alternative, war. This Council has spent 28 sessions, as I said in the opening of my statement, managing the architecture of war. Colombia has convened us today to begin designing something different, bold, even daring and creative toward a just and lasting peace, not only in the Middle East, but across our world. Liberia is ready to join in the effort to build that architecture. The question is whether this Council has the will to do so. I thank you for your kind attention.